This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
All right, welcome into episode 95. This one is titled In Search of Soot. We're going to break down what soot is, what soot testing involves, and of course, what the results would mean to you. Before the main event, though, I want to give a shout out to a friend of the program. He goes by the name of Mike. Thank you so much for the kind words about the show on the latest slip for your 3.6 liter V6 powering your Traverse. Not only do we appreciate you for being a listener of the show, but also we want to congratulate you for an effective maintenance plan because that V6 engine has looked fantastic ever since you started sampling. There was, of course, the factory oil with the expectedly high wear and silicon levels, but we saw the progress that we expected as that wear-in and sealer washed out. And of course, with metals now in great shape compared to averages, we love the way the engine is acclimating itself to the oil change interval, the use the engine sees. It's doing well, and that's a credit to an effective maintenance plan. If you're anything like Mike and you have an engine that you bought when new, sampling it right from the get-go is a great idea for reasons like I just mentioned before. You will, of course, see high levels starting out, but if you sample right from the get-go, then you'll be able to see exactly how much progress the engine is making as it matures, and of course, you can spot problems in the early going. And ideally, what we see is a wear-in sample that serves as basically the high water mark with metals that are at the highest they will hopefully ever be. There can, of course, be different situations where you try, say, like a very short oil run with the factory fill, and then the next fill can pick up more wear-in that was lingering, but we should still see the overall improvement in the wear rates. By wear rates, I'm talking about how much metal is made per mile. We should still see that as the engine matures and settles in. So sampling that factory fill and then the next, and the oil after that lets you see exactly how much progress has taken place. And that way you aren't in a situation where, say, it's the third or the fourth oil change and things really don't look so good, but we don't have a way of telling you, hey, here's where it was, and now you can see how trends have developed. Having that background info is crucial to knowing exactly what path that engine is on. And just a friendly reminder, our voicemail line is open. That number is 614-407-6169. Feel free to drop us a line if you have any questions about the show, Blackstone in general, topics you'd like to be covered on an upcoming episode, whatever the case may be. That voicemail line is open to you, so go ahead and give it a call. That is 614-407-6169. So being as how I'm an analyst, I spend most of my time behind the keys, analyzing results, writing up those comments that you all know and love that go along with the Blackstone Oil Report. But when you're around Blackstone, you see every bit of the operation, no matter what your position is. And unpacking kits in the receiving area is one of those things I'll see every day in passing. And there was one example I wanted to talk about specifically because I think it's always good to remind people the correct technique when they're packing their kit, and some pitfalls you may want to avoid. And in this case, a slightly humorous spin on how to assemble an oil analysis kit. Again, we have a video about this on our YouTube channel that you can follow if you want to see exactly how it's done. If you have any questions, you can, of course, give us a call. But in this case, the customer might not have reached out. I think they decided to wing this one. Definitely decided to wing this one. So what happened was the kit was mailed back to us. And if you're not familiar with our kit, it's a black container with a white sample bottle, some gray absorbent material, oil information slip, plastic bag. And again, if you want step-by-step assembly on all of that, it's done very well in our YouTube video, how to package your oil sample. And in this case, instead of putting the oil in the white sample bottle, the oil was in the black mailing container, which was an interesting choice, mainly because the white sample bottle was also filled up in addition to the black mailer, all tossed inside of the bag, sealed up. And I'm wondering if maybe the customer thought we didn't have enough oil in that white sample bottle. Rest assured, the 3.5 ounce bottle will cover what we need for our analysis. You don't need to fill any additional bottles unless, of course, you're taking multiple samples from multiple engines, or you're sampling the engine, the transmission, etc. But you'd be surprised what we come across when we are unpacking samples, especially right now, when I would be confident in saying we've never had more samples in the receiving area. It's a credit to a loyal customer base and also expanding interest in oil analysis, what it is and what it can do for you. But mainly, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to direct you to our resources. If you have any questions about how to assemble your kit, you either have the website to go to, you can also check out that video on our YouTube channel, how to package your oil sample for the mail. But above all else, don't put oil in the black mailer. That's a bad time. It's not going to keep it in the same condition that the sample bottle will. And also, that sample bottle in the 3.5 ounce capacity it has will more than cover the bases. Now it's time to go beyond the standard analysis, which is where we spend most of our time on this show, because though standard in name, it really is the full gamut of testing in most situations. But some customers like to go beyond the standard in a couple of ways, and soot testing is one of those. It's a test that we offer, and I wanted to explain exactly what it is and what it can mean to you, just in case you might be one of those owners who's interested in adding it on, or if you had questions about what we can do beyond just giving soot a rough evaluation, which is easily doable in our line of work, in that when we're looking at the insolubles tube as part of the standard analysis, you can get an idea of how sooty the oil is based on how dirty that tube is. But I know that some customers definitely want to go beyond the eye test, and I can't blame them, because having a number offers you a concrete evaluation of a result more so than someone just looking at it and saying, it looks fine, which I can certainly understand wanting to go beyond that approach, which is what we can do when we offer soot testing. So if you're a diesel engine owner, I'm sure this is probably something that you're already interested in if you didn't know it was an option already. So in order to obtain a soot result, we use an FTIR spectrometer, FTIR meaning Fourier Transform Infrared. So that's going to measure the percentage of soot in an oil sample. So the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of what's going on here, soot raises the absorption rate of the infrared light spectrum. And when an infrared beam is shot through the sample, the rate of absorption is measured and quantified. As with any other spectral result, this is going to be reliant on a check standard, so we're going to be calibrating against a known 2% soot sample to ensure accuracy. So basically, the spectrometer recognizes the soot content from a sample that has 2% soot, and that allows us to know how much soot is present in other samples that are sent in for testing. Okay, but you might be wondering, what is soot and what impact can it have on the engine? So soot is a natural byproduct of internal combustion, and it's the reason, at least the primary reason, why diesel engine oil turns black, sometimes shortly after it's been put into use. So diesel engine oil will turn black quicker than gasoline engine oil would. Soot's the reason why. And the result of excess soot can be a high viscosity. You can also wind up with deposits on wearing components, or you might even find that it's clogging up an oil filter, and we'll see if the oil filter is used up based on the insolubles level. If insolubles are high, that means the oil filter struggled, and soot can be the reason why. Most recently, I was taking a look at a sample from a VW. It was a 2.0 liter TDI, and soot read 0.4%, pretty low level. Now, I mentioned earlier that 2% is the standard that we use for calibrating the spectrometer when analyzing a sample for soot. 2% is what we consider cautionary, and 1% is getting a bit high. So in this particular sample from the VW, a level of 0.4% is really pretty good, especially after an oil change interval that was rather lengthy. I think it was around 10,000 miles. Earlier, I talked about the effects that soot can have as far as a high viscosity, high insolubles. But going beyond that, excess soot can indicate poor combustion. So that's something you'll want to check for in addition to the remaining physical properties if you are suspicious of poor combustion. You'd also want to consider an issue with the fuel system, because if it's not maintained or properly calibrated, say if you have injectors that are not operating at peak efficiency, the air-fuel ratio is off, that can also be related to excess soot in a used oil sample. And of course, you don't want to forget about the air intake. Checking air intake for leaks, making sure the air filter is clean, properly seated, there's no cracks, leaks, or loose connections. That's another good thing to do if soot is a problem. Standard maintenance practices, like changing the oil, changing your oil filter regularly, doing so on a schedule that's proven to be ideal for the engine that is your sampling, also a good way to prevent soot buildup. Now, we also look at soot in relation to the engine's wear profile, because it can be related to a mechanical problem. Earlier, I mentioned poor combustion. If poor combustion is an issue, we'll often find poor wear from the cylinder area. So we'll be looking at the levels of aluminum, chrome, iron, seeing how they match up next to averages, and what's been typical for your engine in particular. If there are high levels of cylinder area wear, that can go along with poor combustion, just like soot can. So that's why it's important not to take soot alone. I also want to make sure folks know to consider the full gamut of the standard analysis when evaluating a problem like poor combustion or whatever else may be related to excess soot buildup. Knowing how the engine is wearing, also knowing if there's contamination, and of course, seeing if soot has had any impact on the physical properties, such as the viscosity, the insolubles. It all ties together. So that's to say that soot is a test you may be interested in. It certainly is valuable and lends insight, but you want to weigh it against the other tests we can complete in order to get the full overview of what's going on in your engine. It's not an option that I would like to use on its own. I wouldn't take a low soot level and be certain that all is well with a diesel, for example. I would also want to look at the wear profile, again, contaminants, and the physical properties all together. So if you're interested in adding on soot to the standard analysis, that would be an additional cost of $10. So $35 is the cost of the standard, an additional $10 for soot testing. Those two tests together would be a pretty reliable baseline for evaluating how your diesel is doing. But of course, soot isn't necessarily limited to a diesel. We don't expect to see a significant buildup in other engines, but you can add it on if that's something you're interested in. It's just something that primarily applies to the diesel engine owner. All right, that brings today's topic to a close. In search of soot, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about it and what our testing can do, what it means to you if you're an owner. Of course, if you have any questions about the testing and you'd like to inquire about any upcoming topics that we might cover on an episode of Slick Talk, don't hesitate to call our voicemail at 614-407-6169. This is Blackstone Joe, signing off.